The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart. Book 5, The Coming of the Bear, 7. I do not think that now, even in daylight, I could find the path again without a guide, let alone climb it. Rafe went first, with the king's hand on his shoulder, and in my turn I held the fold of Uther's mantle, and Ulfin of mine, mercifully close in as we were to the face of the castle rock. We were protected from the wind, exposed. The climb would have been impossible. We would have been plucked off the cliff like feathers. But we were not protected from the sea. The waves must have been rushing up 40 feet, and the master waves, the great sevenths, came roaring up like towers and drenched us with salt fully 60 feet above the beach. One good thing the savage boiling of the sea did for us. Its whiteness cast upward again what light came from the sky. At last we saw, above our heads, the roots of the castle walls, where they sprang from the rock. Even in dry weather, the walls would have been unscalable, and tonight they were streaming and wet. I could see no door, nothing breaking the smooth, streaming walls of slate. Rafe did not pause, but led us on, under them, toward the seaward corner of the cliff. There he halted for a moment, and I saw him move his arm in a gesture that meant, "Beware." He went carefully round the corner and out of sight. I felt Uther stagger as he reached the corner himself and met the force of the wind. He checked for a moment and then went on, clamped tight to the cliff's face. Ulfin and I followed. For a few more hideous yards we fought our way along, faces into the soaking, slimy cliff. Then a jutting buttress gave us shelter, and we were stumbling suddenly on a treacherous slope, cushiony with sea pink. And there ahead of us, recessed deep in the rock below the castle wall and hidden from the ramparts above by the sharp overhang, was Tintagel's emergency door. I saw Rafe give a long look upwards before he led us in under the rock. There were no sentries above. What need to post men on the seaward ramparts? He drew his dagger and rapped sharply on the door, a pattern of knocks which he, standing as we were at his shoulder, scarcely heard in the gale. The porter must have been waiting just inside. The door opened immediately. It swung silently open for about 3 inches, then stuck, and I heard a rattle of a chain bolt. In the gap a hand showed, gripping a torch. Uther, beside me, dragged his hood closer, and I stepped past him to Rafe's elbow, holding my mantle tightly in my mouth and hunching my shoulders against the volleying gusts of wind and rain. The porter's face, half of it, showed below the torch. An eye peered at Rafe, well forward into the light, and said urgently, "Quick, man! A pilgrim! It's me, back with the Duke." The torch moved fractionally higher, and I saw the big emerald on Uther's finger catch in the light, and said curtly, in Brethael's voice, "Open up, Felix, and let us in out of this, for pity's sake. The Duke had a fall from his horse this morning, and his bandage is soaking. There are just 4 of us here. Make haste." The chain bolt came up, and the door swung wide. Rafe put a hand on it, so that, ostensibly holding it for his master, he could step into the passage between Felix and Uther as the king entered. Uther strode in, past the bowing man, shaking the wet off himself like a dog, and returning some half-heard sound in an answer to the porter's greeting. Then, with a brief lift of his hand, which set the emerald flashing again, he turned straight for the steps which led upwards on our right, and began quickly to mount them. Rafe grabbed the torch from the porter's hand, and Ulfin and I pressed in after Uther. "I'll light them up with this. Get the door shut and barred again. I'll come down later and give you the news, Felix. But we're all drenched and drowned dogs and want to get to a fire. There's one in the guardroom, I suppose?" "Aye." The porter had already turned away to bar the door. Rafe was holding the torch so that Ulfin and I could go past in shadow. I started quickly up the steps in Uther's wake, with Ulfin on my heels. The stairs were lit only by a smoking crescent which burned in a bracket on the wall of the wide landing above us. It had been easy. Too easy. Suddenly above us on the landing, the sullen light was augmented By that from a blazing torch, and a couple of men-at-arms stepped from a doorway, swords at the ready. Uther, 6 steps above me, paused fractionally, and then went on. I saw his hand, under the cloak, drop to his sword under my own. I had my weapon loose in its sheath. Rafe's light tread came running up the steps behind us. "My Lord Duke!" Uther, I could guess how thankfully, stopped and turned to wait for him, his back to the guards. "My Lord Duke, let me light you. That's my torch up there. They've a torch up there." He seemed only then to notice the guards above us, with the blazing light. He ran on and up past Uther, calling lightly, "Hola, Marcus! Selic, give me that torch to light my lord up to the Duchess. This wretched thing's nothing but smoke." The man with the torch had held it high, and the pair of them were peering down the stairs at us. The boy never hesitated. He ran up, straight between the swords, and took the torch from the man's hand. Before they could reach for it, he turned swiftly to douse the first torch in the tub of sand which stood near the guard-room door. It went out into sullen smoke. The new torch blazed cleanly, but swung and wavered as he moved it, so that the shadows of the guards, flung gigantic and grotesque down the steps, helped to hide us. Uther, taking advantage of the swaying shadows, started again swiftly up the flight. The hand with Golois's ring was half up before him to return the men's salutes. The guards moved aside, but they moved one to each side of the head of the steps, and their swords were still in their hands. Behind me I heard the faint whisper as Ulfin's blade loosened from its sheath. Under my cloak, mine was half drawn. There was no hope of getting past them. We would have to kill them, and pray it made no noise. I heard Ulfin's step lagging and knew he was thinking of the porter. He might have to go back to him while we dealt with the guards. But there was no need. Suddenly, at the head of the second flight of steps, a door opened wide, and there, full in the blaze of light, stood Igraine. She was in white, as I had seen her before, but not this time in a night robe. The long gown shimmered like lake water. Over one arm and shoulder, Roman fashion, she wore a mantle of soft dark blue. Her hair was dressed with jewels. She stretched out both hands, and the blue robe and the white fell away from wrists where red gold glimmered. "Welcome, my lord!" Her voice, high and clear, brought both guards round to face her. Uther took the last half-dozen steps to the landing in 2 leaps, then was past them, his cloak brushing the sword blades, past Rafe's blazing torch, and starting quickly up the second flight of steps. The guards snapped back to attention, one each side of the stairhead, their backs to the wall. Behind me I heard Ulfin gasp, but he followed me quietly enough. As calmly and without hurry I mounted the last steps to the landing. It is something, I suppose, to have been born a prince, even a bastard one. I knew that the sentries' eyes were nailed to the wall in front of them by the Duchess's presence, surely as if they were blind. I went between the swords, and Ulfin after me. Uther had reached the head of the stairway. He took her hands, and there, in front of the lighted door, with his enemies' swords catching the torchlight below him, the king bent his head and kissed Igraine. The scarlet cloak swung round both of them, engulfing the white. Beyond them I saw the shadow of the old woman, Marcia, holding the door. Then the king said, "Come." And with the great cloak still covering them both, he led her into the firelight, and the door shut between them. So we took Tintagel. And that is the end of chapter 7.